Are you feeling tired? Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually? And when was the last time that you were just excited about life, full of joy and knowing that you were aligned with your purpose and doing the things that God called you to do and in this season? Well, if you are having issues with any of that, if any of it resonates with you, then you're in the right place, because today we're talking about what to do about not feeling so drained, not feeling so exhausted, and getting back into being purpose aligned, aligned in your purpose, your calling, and your assignment. So hello and welcome to Morning Coffee with Joyce. I'm Joyce Abrils of HerRichLife.com, where I help Christian women design and live purpose-aligned lives. And today I'm so glad that you're here, because we're going to be talking about burnout, exhaustion, and just feeling disconnected from purpose, calling, and assignment. Last week, if you saw the video, I shared my R.E.F.R.E.S.H framework, which is a 7-step framework to get you out of burnout, or if you're headed that way, to stop that burnout in its track. And I also shared that I would be explaining each step of the framework in the coming weeks. Well, today is step 1. We're talking about recognizing the root of your discontent. And and I say discontent, but it could be restlessness, it could be exhaustion, it could be tiredness, but recognizing the root, because getting to the root is the way that we get to solve problems. You know, if you garden, that you can sometimes cut off the roots from the top. But if you don't dig those roots out, if you don't go deep and get it out, then those roots will spring right back up. And so that's why the very first step in this whole framework, this whole refresh process, is finding out what is the root of causing you to be so burnt out, so exhausted, so stressed, and so tired. So before we can fix burnout, we have to understand what's causing it. A couple of weeks ago, I had conversations. It must have been 3 or 4 women, and the conversations were all around being burnt out, exhausted, and tired. And my friend Angela, one of my girlfriends, said, she was feeling so exhausted that all of her joy was just not there anymore, that she felt like she was being burnt out, or she was burnt out and she needed help in getting out of that situation. And so that was just one conversation that led me to pray about, okay, Lord, what can I add to this conversation? And he reminded me I had been burnt out. That's how I left my job. I retired and started a ministry, then a nonprofit, now business. But not only that, but I was feeling a lot of the things that Angela was feeling. And I recognized that, what? I hadn't thought about this before, but if I don't do something, I'm going to be burnt out too. And so I went back and I searched, well, what did I do that last time, that first time that I was burnt out? What did I do? And when I looked at what I did, I came up with this 7-step framework, the R.E.F.R.E.S.H framework. And that is what I'm sharing with you, and why it's such an important thing to my heart. Because as I am hopefully helping you and teaching you, I'm also helping and teaching myself. And so I want you to understand that burnout isn't just about being tired. Burnout is being misaligned. You're not in alignment with God's will for your life. And sometimes that could look like being overcommitted, saying yes to things that God never told you to say yes to. Sometimes it's seeking validation, especially from people who seek validation from work. And then sometimes it's just carrying burdens that God never asked us to carry. One of my favorite scriptures, and one that's very familiar, is Matthew 11:28. And it says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." But here's the thing. You can't come to Jesus for rest if you don't first recognize, well, what is it that's making me weary? And so that is what we're doing today. That is what we're going to figure out. That is the root of the discontent, the restlessness, the exhaustion, the tiredness, the stress that you might be feeling. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to give you an exercise, which I'll be doing too, so that we can, answer this question. So we're going to talk about the real reason you're being drained, because you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. You have to know that. And burnout isn't just about, having too much to do. Sometimes it's about doing things that God never called us to do. And so here are 3 common roots of burnout. And of course, there are others, but I chose these 3 because I believe these are the top 3. Number 1 is striving instead of surrendering. And what I mean by that is trying to control things instead of trusting God's plan. If you say things like, if I don't do it, it'll never be done, or you feel like you have to be everything to everyone, that's striving. That is not surrendering to God's plan. It's not surrendering to his will. Psalm 46:10 says to be still and know that I am God. And I want to ask you this question. What am I trying to control that I need to surrender to God? So that's the first thing, is striving instead of surrendering. And next week, we're going to talk a lot about surrendering. So I'm not going to go deep into it today, but I do want you to understand that that's one of the things that causes burnout. All right, number 2 is overcommitting to what God never assigned you to do. Sometimes we say yes to things out of guilt, out of obligation, out of fear of what people will say if we say no. But what that leads to is being constantly busy, but not necessarily. I don't know what's going on with my internet connection today, but I'm sorry for that pause. Hopefully I'll be able to finish this without that happening again. But the other thing about this is we can be doing good things. We can be doing good things, but we can still be too busy, and those good things aren't fulfilling to us because they can make us feel drained and not energized. Because let's face it, everything that we do, everything that we say yes to, isn't necessarily something that God has called us to do. And when we start, doing a whole lot of things. Okay, let's try this again. Like I said, when we're doing things, even good things, they can still make us feel drained and not energized if it's not what God has called us to do. Ecclesiastes tells us that there's a season for everything. And so you have to ask yourself, did God actually assign me to take this on, or is this something I assigned to myself? And I'm afraid when you ask yourself that question, you're going to see that a lot of times that you actually did this to yourself, because I know that's what's happening with me. I know that's what's going on with me. And so number 3 is neglecting rest. And if you're constantly pouring out but never refilling yourself, or you feel guilty about taking rest, and if you think rest is a luxury, not a necessity, that's neglecting your rest and renewal. As I shared last week, rest is a command by God. It is something that he wants us to do, not only to rejuvenate ourselves physically, but that's how we rejuvenate spiritually and